Warning. This podcast features the truth about owning and operating mobile home parks. The following program is not designed to be sexy. It will not hype you up on MHPs. Rather, this is a raw take on this industry and how you find your own path to success. Welcome to MHP IRL, Mobile Home Parks in Real Life, with your host, Ryan Norris.
So for this episode of Mobile Home Parks in Real Life, I'm going to do something kind of cheesy. I am going to interview my own business partner. But the reason why I decided to do this finally is because I've had so many people ask the great question of business partnerships. What does it take to have a good one? What does it take to find a good one? And all the assorted pros and cons of having a business partner. And I figured no better way than to bring on Ian. So Ian, let's jump right into it. Why don't we start with the most pertinent and obvious question? Clearly I'm Batman and you're Robin. Talk to me about how it's like to be Robin.
Well, there are differing opinions, but that's the one thing we do well is we disagree extraordinarily well. But Ryan and I have been business partners for a little over 3 years now, 3.5 years actually. And we have gone and worked through a lot of problems that hopefully can help you today. So looking forward to this conversation.
So jokes aside, here's where I want to start out. I think I have a little theory that's called 2 is greater than 3 is greater than 1. Or 2 is greater than 1 is greater than 3, depending on your preferences. But the gist of that kind of oxymoronic phrase is that it's like when you go to the gym. When you're working out by yourself versus when you're working out with a spotter or someone next to you, when you have that social pressure, you do one more rep or you go a little bit harder and you have that person to help you keep you accountable. But when you add in a second partner and there's 3 of you, it becomes a social event instead of an actual workout event. And one thing that Ian and I kind of realized early on is, well, maybe not early on, maybe it took us a while, but eventually we realized we were working harder without even knowing we were doing it because we didn't want to let each other down. And so that is a huge reason why having a 50-50 business partner can help you push through the lazy times, because you have someone that is there inherently to keep you motivated. And just want to preface with, we've found what works for us. I know people that are solo that just could not have a business partner. And I know folks who have a couple of them who just have a wonderful working relationship. So this is what works for us. But Ian, please take the mic.
Yeah, I've always been someone who has accomplished more when I've worked with someone. It's something I've learned in my 20s, just being self-aware of when I got the most amount of work done. And Ryan and I have similar ideas of where we want to take this business, and we speak quite frequently on the phone, and it allows me to share ideas, which is really important for me, as well as know that we are doing the right actions and kind of keeping me in line. Because Richard Feynman said something that it's a variation of you're essentially the easiest person to fool. And that is extremely important, especially in business when you're taking in new information, to have someone to counterbalance your thought process as well as your work ethic. Just to know that I can report to Ryan at 8 o'clock on a Saturday and say, yeah, I'm working on this. And it's not to say to show off and say that I'm doing something better. It's just, it's nice to have an accountability partner.
Well, and I think another big aspect of this too is, especially with closings, and there's a lot of times there's some high pressure stuff where stuff needs to get done on a deadline. And there's often a roller coaster of emotions. To have someone who not only can relate to what you're going through, but is also experiencing that in real time, that's completely invaluable, at least I think to us. But you mentioned this earlier, and I think it's huge. It's disagreeing well. If you were to ask my wife why her and I get along so well, it's because we don't always see eye to eye, but when we do, we don't take it personally. We act normally, and we get through really tough disagreements with civility and with humility, and we respect and acknowledge that, and that helps us move forward without developing contempt.
Well, the people that know our partnership best will know that I'm probably a little bit more of the hothead in the partnership. And Ryan is extraordinarily skilled at, and might have to do partly with just his background in car sales and sales in general, with taking heat very well. And so for me, allowing to express myself in the most authentic way possible, which, may not work for everyone, but allowing me to just not have to mince my words and say something, that is extremely important for me to be able to be extremely vulnerable and extremely authentic with kind of the way that I'm wired. And so that has allowed me to express my feelings, and Ryan takes that. He never takes it personally, and he will find ways to get to the root of what I'm actually trying to get at. And that has been extremely helpful. And I try to do the same when he's in a heightened emotion that I might not be feeling at that moment in time, and he'll let me know when he feels that I need to make changes as well. So it's an understanding that we're both going towards the same mission, the same goal. We are doing this to achieve our greatest dream, and it's not to tear the other person down, but more towards building towards something. And sometimes we're human, emotions come way further ahead than logic, and we're willing to forgive each other over that, regardless of how that situation takes place.
I think it's important to note that we also make fun of each other a lot. We make fun of ourselves a lot, and we make fun of others a lot. There's a lot of comedic insults tossed around, which I think my favorite quote in regards to that is from Oscar Wilde, which is, "If you want to tell someone the truth, make them laugh. Otherwise, they'll kill you." And I think, to kind of echo what you said earlier, you have to be able to be vulnerable to someone and have that trust so you can sort through emotions and you can sort through your feelings and do your best to, going along with accountability, hold yourself rational. Keep yourself rational, because it's hard to fight those emotions. And one big way that I cope with stress and that we kind of get through difficult conversations is just with comedy. So that's a big thing. But you mentioned this, and I thought it was spot on. Incentives must align. We have a mutual goal that goes much farther beyond owning and operating mobile home parks. It's a greater social goal. We want to affect positive change with what we're doing, from education to financial well-being to all of the above. And that helps us get through hard days. But what are some other ways, Ian, that you and I have been able to keep our incentives aligned?
Well, I think number one is to have 50-50 ownership of the business. No one owns more than the other, so no decisions are trumped. We literally will stalemate each other if we do not come to some sort of agreement. And we have it structured that way, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Also, it is helpful for us to, mobile home parks is obviously our vehicle that we truly love, that we came into. We have a goal, at least, of how we want to grow. I think it's important. There's a lot of ways to grow in this business. And for us, we have both agreed that growing maybe slower but more sustainably makes more sense. So there's no incentive for us to purchase things that would put us in a financial situation that could be detrimental, especially since we're young and we use recourse debt. So those, on at least the partnership side within the operating business, is something that we see eye to eye on. And a lot of the times before we even talk, I think we know the answer to each other's questions before we ask, just because we've talked through these things so often.
So you mentioned this earlier, and I want to echo it. Acknowledging emotion overpowers logic. And it's it is uncomfortable thinking about how frequently that happens, where you look back on something that I'll throw myself, speaking of making fun of yourselves, I'll make fun of myself right now. We bought a property that I thought had the potential to be a huge operational time suck. And I was thankfully very, very wrong. And now in retrospect, I can laugh at it. But I'm very glad that Ian helped me keep my grounding in the regards that I was kind of doing analysis paralysis. And he was like, in so many words, dude, relax. If it gets out of control, we are the team that can dump a bunch of time into this and get it right. And I think having that business partner to bounce those, you mentioned earlier, vulnerability, to bounce that vulnerability off of and be like, this is what I'm truly thinking and I have some serious concerns here. For him to be there and go, those are valid concerns. I disagree with those. I'm going to help you be a little bit more rational through this. I'm going to ask you to be very specific in your concerns. And I know you aren't going to like talking about this until several months later when I can laugh at you for being totally wrong. That is such a crucial part of fighting through your emotions to be rational. Munger and Buffett talk about controlling your own psychology a lot. Ian, please, what other instances do you think are worth mentioning where we've helped each other get through some really tough emotions to maintain rationality?
Well, if you ever overhear Ryan and I on a conversation and you hear one of us say, do the math in a very stern voice, you know we're talking about exactly this. Because numbers usually speak louder and more rationally than, the feeling towards certain feelings. And so for us, another thing that we've really struggled with and just communicated with a lot of times is just strategy. Like, should we use business partners? Should we go into more tertiary markets? And that has allowed us to have those conversations and have a unified theme that help us better understand where we're at. And I think, I forgot the question. I was like, why am I talking about this? I don't even know where I'm going with this.
So Another really big thing that I think I learned personally at the car dealership was being able to admit that you were wrong as soon as possible. So I give this example of when you're in the car dealership, as a car salesman, it's really, really hard sometimes the amount of pressure a customer puts on you for vital information. For example, the invoice price on the car. Eventually you'll crack. Eventually someone will ask you enough times in a certain way where you're like, okay, the invoice is $20,000 or whatever. But the problem is when you then go to catch your manager up to speed and they go, how did they find out the invoice price? The manager will yell at you for saying, well, I cracked under pressure and I gave them the invoice price, right? And then they yell at you and then it's unpleasant for everyone involved. But here's the thing, the manager needs to know that. The manager, that's vital information to close a car deal. But what happens is due to the punishment you get for divulging the invoice price is so, like, you just don't want to get yelled at that you lie. It conditions you to lie. And so that was a very valuable lesson because to me, I would rather look like an idiot and admit that I did something really, really stupid so that everyone is operating on fact and what we all have a communal knowledge. And what I try to do when either one of our employees is wrong or Ian is wrong or I am wrong, try to create an environment that is comfortable for someone to just be like, you know what, I goofed. Here's what we're working with. So then we can go from there.
Well, Ryan said that this interview was going to be mostly me talking, but it sounds like he likes to take all the points. But for me, I am...
You did a great job preparing for this, by the way. So I'm having to do all the work per usual.
Hey, this is his podcast. So he doesn't put any thought into my LinkedIn posts. I get more views than him.
He's crushing it.
Dude, which one are we on?
The bottom one.
Okay.
We're almost done.
Dude, you took every thought I was going to say. I was like, I was going to say that. Okay, I don't need to say that. One thing I do when I make a mistake in our partnership usually is call Ryan right away and I let him know. Or on the flip side, when I find something really that makes me really uncomfortable, for example, I have a cold call where the owner blows me up. And when I say blows me up, I mean yells at me for calling them too much or hanging up the phone on me. Anyways, that has allowed us to get to the answer. It allows us to, again, we have just a mutual understanding that let's be as transparent as possible because it helps us get to our goal quicker. So we're not hiding behind an ego. We want to be understanding. And that's one of the things I think we both do well is usually the mistake isn't as big as you think you're going to make it. And two, it's way less of a mistake if you can stop it in its tracks than if you let it go on for a couple months without saying a word to anyone. For example, I really like this contractor. He drove from Asheville to Spartanburg to see me because he wanted to shake my hand, get to know me. Well, little did I know that I was actually a giant red flag for Ryan, and he had a feeling that this wasn't a good situation, but I gave him money in his name personally. I got all the documents signed appropriately, but it gave him power, and we ended up losing $4,000. Ryan didn't berate me for that. He still jokes with me about it, and it's funny. However, now we have a process in place for vetting contractors, and we still make mistakes with it. That allows us to get better as opposed to placing blame on each other.
Yeah, and that's a great example because you did a lot right with that. You got him to sign a contract that was very specific: Social Security, phone number, birth date, copy of the driver's license. So when I handed it over to the detective didn't, there was nothing else we had to do. He ended up getting arrested and went to jail for fraud because this wasn't the first time he had done it, and he actually had a warrant for his arrest in another county. So for me in that moment, because I remember meeting the guy and I remember being like, I'm uncomfortable with this, but I trust you, Ian. Well, I don't think I saw enough to say, you know what, cut it out. So I was at fault too. And we had covered enough of our bases so that we ended up learning a lot from our mistake and sending a bad person literally to jail. He actually got a conviction because he had burned a couple sweet old ladies, which really got under my skin. But none of that would have happened, I think, if I had called Ian up and been like, you're an idiot. How can you have just basically just given this dude money and let him run with that? There's a great quote that is super long, and I'm going to do my best to paraphrase it, from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, which is basically, the paraphrase is something along the lines of, borrowing strength builds weakness or creates weakness. And in other words, if you have to use your authority or intimidation to get your way in the moment, what that does in the long run is way more destructive than anything you might be able to achieve in the short run. I'd like to pivot now to something totally different, which is, how do you find a good business partner who complements you? I hope the listeners hear the kind of great friendship and business partnership that we have. And I'm interested to hear your answer, Ian, but my answer is it's very similar to having found my wife, which is there's eHarmony, there's Match.com, there's literally billions of dollars that go into helping you find a significant other, and no one quite has it figured out, because there's just some aspect that you can't quantify. And if you were to ask Ian and I how we found each other, it was pure luck.
It was Tinder. Tinder BFFs. I swiped right. It was.
We actually grew up in the same neighborhood, so it was just total dumb luck.
My thought is this. It's no different than what I've been thinking about diet. There's 7 billion people on this planet. There's no one blueprint. So what does that mean? It means give yourself the best shot to make that happen. How do you do that? You take actions and take steps to put you in front of people who you think you would want to be a business partner with. What are your strengths? What are you good at? What are you lacking? What are you looking for in a partnership? Another reason why our partnership is successful is because we have complements. I'm much more of a deal guy. Ryan is really fascinated with operations. We both overlap on both of those, but for whatever reason, we just kind of fill in the gaps where the other person doesn't really spend the time. For example, Ryan took the initiative, even though I have the finance degree, to do accounting and taxes because I had no interest in doing it. The question is, how do you find that? And the best way to do that, I think, is meet as many people as possible. Get to know people. I think one of the biggest mistakes people make with business partnerships is they rush it. It's no different than dating or anything else in life. Get to know someone for a substantial amount of time. Maybe start small. Ryan and I knew each other as children. We weren't even that friendly as children. There's truth to that statement. And over time, we developed a friendship and relationship. It wasn't like one meetup that we met and said, now's the time. And I don't think many people actually find business partners that way. My guess is it's long, sustainable relationships over time where you get to really know someone, because you can't know someone in 20 minutes. So start small. I would say meet a lot of different people, connect with a lot of different people, maybe even do deals with several different people and kind of see how those works. There's been many, many partnerships in mobile home parks of high quality and high caliber teams that have broken apart. And I think part of it is because it was rushed. And so you have to I think the long game is the way to view it. And not all partnerships last for, stay out. Some serve their purpose. So I would reach out to as many people as possible and try to do as many deals with many people. And when you find someone's good, then you just double down on that.
Well, Ian, I can't thank you enough for jumping on here. I know how much you didn't want to do this. True story, everybody. I was very passionate about doing a podcast, and Ian was like, "No way, dude. You can run with it. You can say it's Archimedes Group podcast, but it's the Ryan Show."
And I'm happy, and I still stand by those words. I'm excited that Ryan, another reason for our partnership, talking about disagreeing well, I didn't feel like we had much to add to the mobile home park space. And Ryan definitely turned me around to the idea that we actually have content that might resonate with people. But that took a while. It definitely took a while. And even though I said no, Ryan still did it. And he's a year into it. And now I'm finally coming around to,
Well, you found your medium.
Correct. I found it in a different way, in a different light. And for me, LinkedIn has been a very valuable resource, but I only started in January. You've been doing this for 14 months?
Yeah, and we both really like video, which is pretty hysterical because, true story, everybody, I used to make these silly little videos growing up, and my little brother and Ian were really good friends, and so to hang out with my brother, sometimes Ian would have to hang out with me, and oh my god, Ryan is doing this stupid video again. I don't want to be in this, especially when we chase after you with airsoft guns.
Or throw apples at me or whatever. Or pretend we're Pokemon.
And we've come full circle because now we're both doing videos. Ryan
is still the bigger editor. But yeah, it's funny how life will throw curveballs at you. And, never say never. I've started to learn that no relationship's worth burning and no relationship's really worth throwing in the trash can because you never know when that relationship might come into existence and might be meaningful for you.
Would having my due diligence list help you? If so, I will let you have it for free. That's right. My list that took me 3 years to develop and includes plenty of fixes for mistakes that I made that now you can avoid. All absolutely free. All I ask for in exchange is leave me a 5-star review and a comment. Screenshot your comment after it goes live and email it to me at my website, archimedesgrp.com. Afterwards, let's connect. This episode was inspired by a listener just like you. Even if you don't have any ideas for future episodes, let's still connect, as I'm sure there are ways you and I can help each other out. I'm looking forward to chatting soon.